Kari. But I got to tell you who I am. And my name is Ann Moss Rogers. I own a blog called Emotionally Naked. And my son Charles is the funniest and most popular kid in school. But 5 years ago, he killed himself. And we were shocked because I had no idea that my son was struggling with thoughts of suicide. So when I started the blog, it was to find healing through writing and shine a spotlight on taboo topics of mental illness, addiction, drinking, suicide, grief, and all those subjects that everybody wants to talk about. So I'm glad you're here tonight, and I'm going to introduce Kari. Kari Schwear is the founder of Gray Tonic and Question the Drink, which, by the way, is now a registered trademark, Question the Drink, a discovery coaching program for men and women who are using alcohol to cope with stress. She specializes in gray area drinking, the space between socially consuming alcohol and alcoholism. Kari is co-author of an upcoming book, The Successful Mind: Tools for Living a Purposeful, Productive, and Happy Life. I welcome my friend and fellow National Speaker Association member, Kari Schwear.
Schwear. It's Schwear. Yeah, just
Schwear. It is Schwear.
Yes, thank you. That was perfect. Thank you, Ann Moss. I appreciate that.
I am going to launch the
poll. Yeah. So if you see the poll, this is really just to get an idea, why you're here. Are you curious about the topic in general? Are you worried maybe for yourself? And we're not seeing your actual, from who, we're just seeing the actual number, so we know who is all in attendance. And or you're concerned about somebody else, a loved one. And these are some real, considerations to think about today. So that would be helpful if you can go ahead and answer that. And I'm going to just click it myself because it popped up on my screen. So I'm going to put, I want to know more about this topic, and you guys can click what you want to click, and then we'll see what that looks like. So thank you for doing that. That's very helpful.
All right, I'm going to close the poll in the next 5 seconds. All right, in poll. And the results are, I'm concerned about someone else is 25%. I'm wondering about myself, 38%. And I just wanted to know more about this topic, 63%.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking a moment to answer those questions, or the poll rather. And so we know a little bit what direction we're going to go today. So it is a very generalized, wide spectrum that we're going to be talking about today. What is gray area drinking? I'm just going to, get that part out so we all know what it is. So when we're talking about it, so gray area drinking really is the space, as Ann Moss already mentioned, between socially drinking when we're out having a good time and we enjoy a glass of wine or two or a beer here and there, and it's really not a big deal. That's what we consider a social drinker. They're not doing much more than that. It's an occasional thing. They're not thinking about it. It's just every so often. We can look at it that way. And then we have the other side of the spectrum, which is somebody who is physically dependent on alcohol. In other words, they are physically and emotionally, so it's psychologically and physically addicted to alcohol. This is somebody who we would consider alcoholic, or that is suffering from alcoholism, or that is severely abusing alcohol. And I'm going to pause there just for a moment because I want to there's a little bit of a nuance here that I want to make sure that we all hear, that we're starting to get away from the term alcoholism and replace it with alcohol abuse disorder. And there are 3 categories that fall under alcohol abuse disorder. We have mild, we have medium, and we have severe. Now, this in itself can be a little bit of a gray area. So when we talk about gray area drinking, we're talking about somebody who is somewhat psychologically dependent on alcohol, meaning that there is a habitual process going on in our brain, but we're not physically, meaning we can't live without it. We can't go a day or two without having alcohol in our system. That would be somebody who is physically dependent on alcohol. So that is the difference that we're talking about, these two spectrums, or the spectrum in between these two pillars of people that we're describing today. So that's what we're focusing on. And by the way, about 50% of those that consume alcohol are in this gray area. It's a tremendous amount. So yeah, that's what we're going to be focusing on today.
Okay, and notice that a lot of things have shifted and changed in COVID, and people are either eating more, exercising more, which is a good thing, or they are drinking more. And
Yes.
I talked with two people on my recent vacation. I was in the mountains and I was 6 feet away, and we were at a park, and I was talking to somebody, and she said the only difference is I'm drinking more wine. And I'm hearing that theme a lot.
Yeah.
So can you put some substance behind
Yes. Yes. Well, first of all, almost all gray area drinkers are drinking because they're doing it as a coping aid or a coping mechanism for stress. So this is one area that is kind of important to recognize too, that because they're not physically addicted, that they're using alcohol in order to relax, chill out, to forget their stressful day, deal with a broken relationship or a toxic relationship. They're not happy at work. There's something going on that's causing them to have some discomfort and stress. And this is a way for them to alleviate the stress, is by drinking. And what happens is, this does work, by the way, right? Alcohol is a depressant. So it does calm things down, but it's only temporary. And then it actually causes more problems on the backside of that with other things, which we can get into in a minute. One of the things that I wrote down, and I was telling Ann Moss before we even got on this call, a friend of mine actually today shared with me from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which is obviously here in Richmond, Virginia. And in Virginia, our alcohol control board, or the ABC, in this department that controls all the alcohol sales for our state, published today or yesterday, 22 hours ago, that our sales here in Virginia was $1.2 billion so far in 2020. And that has been an increase of $120 million increase from this time last year. That's a tremendous amount. So when we start thinking about, well, why is that? Well, it's the obvious, right? We all know that COVID has created a tremendous amount of stress on our mental health, on our physical health. Why? Because we're not able to get out. When COVID hit, we weren't, the gyms were closed, everything was closed. People retreated at home. And this can really affect people on a psychological level of increasing that stress because of things changing so much. So this is a lot of what you talk about too, Ann Moss, is that when we start to think about how our mental state is, and this affects us, and we move into this fight or flight response in our nervous system, or we have one of the core emotions, such as sadness or fear, or you're disgusted or you're lonely, and a way to combat some of those feelings is by pouring a drink. Now we see why this pattern is happening over and over again. And it's so natural to do this, right? We don't want to feel anything. And this is why people start to drink and or drink more. And then it becomes this habitual process over a period of time. And our brain says, hey, remember that it worked. It helped to relax me. And now I want more of that. So now that one glass of wine, or that one beer, or that one bourbon on the rocks can turn into 2 or 3 or more. And this is where it starts to get into a deeper shade of gray. So definitely. And we have from one of our guests on here that a relative is going through a divorce, and widely because his wife is cheating on him, he has no clue, and he's drinking a bit much, right? Wow. So
and that's typical. Look at the typical Hollywood movie. They break
absolutely.
up. What is the first thing they do? They either get out the Ben and Jerry's ice cream, or they go to the bar and they blow it out. And it's like, can you get a little bit more creative? Can you do something else other than show the same thing that everyone does? It really bothers me.
Yes. Well, part of that problem too is that, society in general, we've done a really great job of showcasing alcohol in such a glorious, romantic, seductive way. And
Right.
what happens with that is, like, who doesn't want to be sexy? Who doesn't want to have, to feel like you're being romantic, or it's part of the whole ambiance when you're going out for dinner, or and it's also expected, right? We expect to see it at weddings. We expect to see it at networking events. We expect it when we go to a friend's house. We can't seem to get away from it. And because alcohol is legal, by the way, it's the only legal drug that we have. And because it's legal and it's accepted and almost expected, this is where we start to run into this, well, everyone's doing it, that why can't I do it? And this is part of the issue that comes. So, and then she says, she told him she wanted a divorce. He had no idea that she was seeing someone else. Yeah, that's really, really tough. And in that situation, one of our guests was sharing about a husband and wife, that the wife was cheating on him. He didn't have an idea. He found out, and then now he's drinking more than ever. And that is because he's crushed, right? His spirit's crushed. And without having another healthier way of coping with that stress, he went to alcohol to deal with that. And that happens so frequently.
Yeah, it does. It makes you feel better. You feel good, and people want that jolt of feeling good. And I've noticed among grieving parents, that is, too much alcohol is very, very typical among the bereaved, particularly those who've lost a child, because they feel like, I can't get from one day to the next, and this helps me. But what it does is keeps people stuck.
Yes. Yes.
It keeps people stuck.
Well, it keeps them stuck because, remember, alcohol is a depressant. So it actually brings us down. So we're fighting this. And for those that are on antidepressants, for example, antidepressants, the serotonin, you have their serotonin receptors is how they work. And now you have the depressant of alcohol that's fighting with the dopamine. So now you got these neurotransmitters that are going, what am I supposed to do with all this? Right? I got the antidepressant and I got the alcohol, and it's like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? And your body doesn't know what to do, and it gets us all out of whack. So of course there's tons of health issues that go along with alcohol. But I do want to, in the spirit of gray area drinking, we are using alcohol as a way to cope. We are using it as a way to escape, or to move away from not feeling a specific thing, or to numb, right? We don't want to feel something. And yes, it works temporarily, but only for that, maybe that half an hour while you have the initial buzz that's happening. And then after that, it's all downhill pretty much, because you're waking up the next day feeling like crap, and then you've got the guilt feeling going on. And so
I think with COVID, it is sort of more kind of a stimulant, even though it's not a stimulant, but it is stimulating. It's like, I'm bored. I want something to kind of change things up. And I think that's another reason too, is because people are bored. They just like don't have anything else to do. And it's like, well, I can make more cocktails.
Yes, that's very true.
Tell us a little bit about your own story and what your own aha moment was.
Yeah, so I was definitely a typical gray area drinker. I was working, my drinking actually started when I was in the food and beverage business, and I used it to deal with some of my stress that I had. And then I brought the wine home with me. So I had one glass of wine after dinner. And my husband, I remember, this is going back into my 30s, honey, you're having a glass of wine with dinner. I'm like, yeah, they do it in Europe. I'm all right. Like, they drink in Europe, I can drink here. And he said, well, be careful with that. Now, his mom was an alcoholic. She actually passed from years of abuse with alcohol and pain medication. So he knew the signs, right? So he was sort of already watching, like, I don't want my wife to have a drinking problem. And I assured him it wasn't going to be a problem. Well, it wasn't for quite some time, because with most addictions and so forth, it happens where you have one, and then eventually you'll have like 2 glasses. Like I said, for me, it started off very slowly. And in 2014, I started having my planted seeds, as I call them, which was a girlfriend and my husband, both said to me, you know, Kari, I've noticed that you're drinking a little bit more than maybe you should. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And at first I got very defensive about it. But I realized, gosh, maybe I am. But I was so high functioning. I mean, I never missed work. I was never late for work. Well, might have been late now and then, but let's be real. But you know, none of my life, no parts of my life were being negatively affected. So therefore I thought I was fine. And this is kind of the hidden things with gray area drinking, where you're, you know, I could go a month without drinking. I could go 2 weeks without drinking. It wasn't a big deal for me to skip over that. But what was really happening was it was starting to really impact me on the psychological part of, it was feeding into all these limiting beliefs that I already had. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. I can't do it all. I'm trying to be the wife, the mom, the professional businesswoman, the manager, the leader. I have to be all these things. And the pressure was too great. And I got to the point in 2016, after a full day of drinking, and came home and said some nasty words to my younger son, which I won't repeat. It's just something no mother should ever say to their child. And he reminded me of that the very next day and told me what I had said to him. And I was devastated. I broke down and cried. And I said to my husband, all right, that's it. I'm going to make a decision that I need to really focus on my relationship with alcohol. And I started to examine it. And that is what I would tell anybody who is watching or that is concerned with your drinking. You can't worry about somebody else. You can be concerned for them and pray for them and hope for them, but you can't change somebody else. I'll say that first. The second thing is, if you are starting to have those internal questions of, I wonder if I am drinking too much. I wonder if it is becoming a problem. Those are little seeds that have been planted for you at some point and now are starting to blossom. Pay attention to it, because this is the opportunity for you to make a decision. And right now it's still a choice. For gray area drinkers, it's a choice to drink. When you move into alcoholism, or you're severely abusing alcohol, where you're physically dependent, you no longer have a choice. So this is like this spot to be in. You know, it's the place that you really need to question the drink, which is why that's the name of my coaching program, is to question the drink. Question your relationship with alcohol. How are you using it? How are you showing up for yourself, as well as your family, your work, your friends, your coworkers? Are you the best version of who you can be? Because most gray area drinkers, Ann Moss, are high performers. They appear that they have it all together, which was my story. Everyone from the outside world looked at me and was like, wow, she's got it going on. You know, she's got it all together. I didn't, though. That was part of the persona that I was trying to portray. That was part of the imposter syndrome coming through.
Right. So
very, very common.
What do you think we're modeling to our children when we do this?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. I was one of those parents that did drink in front of my kids and occasionally would get intoxicated, hence that night I told you about. And this is sending them the signal, a couple things. One, it's okay to drink. Number two, when mom and dad are upset or angry or frustrated or mad or whatever the feeling or the emotion is, that this is what we do. It's a learned behavior. And here's a little fact. Before the age of 7, our brains are like sponges. Between the time we're born to the age of 7, everything we learn becomes embedded in our subconscious as beliefs and decisions. So when your 3-year-old that you don't think is paying attention to you, and you're pouring a glass of wine, and they're recognizing mom's angry, she's pouring a glass of wine. Wine equals what we do when we're upset. And this becomes an embedded truth for that child. And so what we do in front of our kids, particularly when they're younger, you might not think that they're paying attention or they even know what that means, but they do. And it becomes embedded as factual to them. They've done numerous studies on this with neuroscientists, and there's plenty of studies out there. But this is factual. This is very factual and very real, and something to be concerned about. But with our teenagers, you know, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, and now they see, you know, mom and dad are drinking and partying with the neighbors, and they're having the cookouts and this and that, or the, you know, the block parties that everyone gets drunk and it's okay. And they're watching you, they're emulating your behavior.
What about that gray area of figuring out if you've got a problem? To me, if you have a feeling that it's not quite right, it's probably not. But
Right.
do you have any specific parameters that can help people determine whether what is too much, you know, or being dependent on it for the wrong reasons, even if it's not a daily ritual?
Yes, those are really good questions. So really getting honest with yourself and examining why you're using it and looking at your thoughts and your feelings around drinking. So in other words, when you come home from work, if it is a natural thing for you to do, is to go to the refrigerator and grab a beer, is it, you know, obviously it's a habitual process that you've created in your brain. It's this loop that you've created that I'm home from work. This is just what I do. Just like when you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth and you have your morning routine, now this has become a nightly routine. But paying attention to the thinking that's going on in that moment. What is it throughout the day that's causing you to want to go home and do that? And when we can stop and be super honest with what we're thinking that's creating these feelings, whether it's anger, disgust, tired, hungry, lonely, some of these emotions that we have, when we can understand the emotional signature that's tied to that thought, that's what's creating these actions that we're doing by proceeding to drink. So when we can become really, really familiar with what that looks like in those patterns, that's where the real work comes in, because now we can start to manage some of those emotions and really get honest with ourselves and really pay attention of why. So a couple things you can do is, I have something that I use in my program called Think Through the Drink. So you want to think all the way through that drink. So if you're like, I'm really wanting to cut back and I'm making the decision I don't want to drink tonight. And then you go home and you're like, screw that, I'm going to have a drink. You want to think through it. If I do have this drink, well, first of all, why do I really want it? Like I said, what are all the reasons? Get really honest with your thinking here and the feelings, recognizing that. If I go ahead and pour a drink, will I stop at one or will I have more than one? The second thing is, okay, well, if I have more than one, how will I feel about myself tomorrow? Gosh, I have a meeting at 8:30 a.m. and I wanted to go to the gym. If I drink, will I be able to do those things? And then maybe it's an outing somewhere. Do you have to drive? What will happen if you don't stop at one or two? Is it possible you could get pulled over and get a DUI, or that you might miss your child's soccer game because you had too much to drink and oops, you forgot again? These are some of the questions, thinking all the way through that end result of following through with that drink. That's why it's called Think Through the Drink. You want to think through the whole process.
Do you have them journal? Do you have people journal?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So journaling, breathing, whenever we're in a heightened emotional state, breath work is the best thing that I recommend. It's the number one tool that works instantly because it works on our central nervous system to calm our breath and bring everything into a calmer state. So just by deep controlled breathing is the first thing that I would recommend if somebody's heightened with emotions or if they're angry. Before you act, breathe, look at your thinking, think about your feelings in the moment, journal those, pay attention and watch for those patterns.
Okay. So,
and my dog is making an appearance.
Yeah, and I need to close my blind because I've got that glowy look.
Oh no, you're fine.
Where I look like all white, and it's when the sun comes through. what did you notice after you stopped drinking? And as you answer that question, I'm going to close that blind.
Wait, what was your question? What did I think about
What did you notice when you stopped?
Oh, when I quit drinking. Oh my gosh, we'd be here all day. The clarity, the fog is lifted. It's almost like we've all driven in dense fog, right? And then all of a sudden it lifts and you're like, wow, you can see the road for miles. But when you're in the fog, you can't see but just a few feet in front of you. That's exactly what it's like when I eliminated alcohol. And I, again, wasn't physically dependent on it, but when we can clear it out of our minds and we can have this fresh thinking and we become so in tune with who we are, everything becomes crystallized on what we want. And so there's an expansion that happens when this occurs in every area of our life. I mean, you have to be intentional about it, but sleep, obviously cognitive awareness is so much better. I lost a ton of weight, not initially though, because most people who decide to stop drinking or cut back on the drinking or quit altogether, whatever it is, it's sugar, right? It's like we're drinking sugar. So when we get rid of that, then we tend to replace it with some other sugar type products. So in the beginning, I didn't lose weight, but eventually I did. There's so many benefits, better relationship with my husband and my kids. I launched my own business, go figure. There's so many things. There's so many benefits, health-wise, relationship-wise, just in every way you could think. The core being of who we are in every aspect is so much better when we just don't have that ethanol in your body.
Yeah, when I stopped drinking right after my son killed himself. And the reason I stopped was that I was talking to a man one night, and he said it was 7 years after his son's suicide, and he says, I can't get through every day unless I drink heavily. Mm. And he seemed stuck. He seemed like he had not made any progress. The week before, I had had lunch with my friend Roz. She was 7 years out, and she was talking about vacation and starting a new nonprofit. And, she had all these normal people plans. So we talked about our sons, but we also talked about other things. And I said, I want to be like Roz. So I decided that I couldn't heal if I couldn't feel. And that numbing it wasn't going to help me move forward. And I didn't want to get stuck, especially in that early process, because it is so brutal and so agonizing. Yeah. I really wanted to do the work to get past that. The first thing I noticed was how obsessed our culture is with alcohol. Every event. And it was not long after we moved into the house where some friends came over to look at the new house, and I didn't have any wine or beer. They stayed 10 minutes because I didn't have anything for cocktail hour, and then they left.
Oh, wow.
And then when they called again, they said, well, maybe we shouldn't come at cocktail hour since y'all don't drink and don't have anything. So, I mean, it was almost like insulting us. I mean, we just moved into the house. We didn't even have much furniture in it yet, much less, but good God, they could deal with no furniture. They couldn't deal with no cocktails.
Yes, crazy.
And it was all these events in Richmond, all about the beer, all about the microbrewery. Every single event of alcohol, and I'm thinking, heroin's tough.
Yeah.
But those who are dependent or addicted to alcohol, it must be so hard because it is constantly in your face.
Yeah. Which is why recognizing when you're in the gray area is such a special place to be. Because at this point you still have a choice, right? You still have a choice. There's no shame in it. There's absolutely no shame in being in the gray area. There's so many people that are, but it's an opportunity. It's really an opportunity for you to question the drink, question where you are with it, be super honest, and I'm not on a crusade against alcohol in a big sense. It's never going to go away. It's always going to be around. But I think about smoking, for example. If we look at how smoking has been diminished over the years, and it's everyone smoked back in the 70s and 80s, and you don't see so much about that anymore. I don't think alcohol is ever going to go away, and I'm not so much on a crusade against alcohol as I want people to really pay attention to their relationship with alcohol so that they can really begin to take some steps to get serious about where they are before they get physically dependent. That is what I want to make sure that my message resonates with others, that it's okay to be in the gray area. Yeah. A lot of us are.
But I get social pressure still. And somebody said the other day, God, I really would love to see you drunk, Ann Moss. I'm like, why would you want to see that? I mean, I'll dance on a table perfectly sober. We don't need to see me with any alcohol in me.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
It's that pressure. I mean, I'm still pressured and get the social pressure. Now, I don't care. I've always been good about nobody's going to make me do anything I don't want to do. And I've been like that since teenager. Mm-hmm. But, for those who are younger, I can understand how that pressure, plays out.
Yes. Yeah. It's very real. Both of my sons are in their 20s and they no longer drink. Unfortunately, they were forced by the law. And so, sometimes it doesn't necessarily take a rock bottom. That was their rock bottom. I didn't have a rock bottom. Most gray area drinkers don't.
Yeah. And I think rock bottom is a big myth. So everybody thinks that something really devastating has to happen when sometimes it's just, I just don't like where this is going, and it just hits you one day.
Yep. We have a question, and for privacy, I won't say this person's name, but I will read the question. What if I try to stop drinking, but my husband won't support me and he has even a worse problem? What do I do? Oh my gosh, this is such an amazing question. Most of my clients are married or with a significant partner, and most of the partners are also drinkers. And this is one of the biggest concerns. So I'm glad this question came in, because I definitely want to answer this for this person. So here's what I'll say. There's such a thing called liquid glue. And a lot of times our spouse who drinks as much as we do or more, what's holding the relationship together can be this relationship that you each have with alcohol. And that's why we refer to it as liquid glue. So I'm a proponent of having marriages and partnerships stay together, right? I've been married 31 years, and my husband and I just went through a very rocky time the end of last year, and we buckled down and we got through it. And I'm a big proponent of keeping people together. So my advice for that is, if you are serious about changing your relationship with alcohol, that you seriously change your relationship with alcohol, and you will lead by example. It is very difficult to convince a partner that they have to do the same things that you're doing. Number one, of practical advice. Number one, I would have a very serious, when you're not drinking, conversation with the spouse to tell them what your concerns are, that this is what you want to do, that you want to take the initiative of working on your own relationship with alcohol, that you're noticing that you don't like the way that you're using it, or the way that you're showing up, or how you feel, or whatever the reasons are that you have on why you want to really eliminate or cut back on your alcohol consumption. You're going to have that direct heart-to-heart conversation. If the liquid glue is a piece of this relationship, that partner is going to push back. A couple of reasons why they do this. One is because they're afraid that you're going to ask them to quit when they're not ready. And again, that person will have to get to that point eventually, and you can get them there by leading by example. Right. But really focusing on where you are, what you want, because you can't change anybody else. We all, even as parents, we want to change our kids. We want to change our spouse. Like, why can't they just do what we want them to do?
And we lecture them.
Yes. Yes. You can't do that. You can't say, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be drinking too much. Nobody wants to be told what to do. So all you can do is really focus on yourself and have this deep why, have this deep connection to why you want to make this shift, having the story that you want to create and tell yourself and others on why you decided to do this. But having this deep desire is so important. It has to be something of deep meaningfulness to you in order for you to proceed with doing this successfully, right? So focusing on you, almost being selfish, and then creating some sort of boundaries. Now, I'm not saying boundaries against you and that partner, but protecting yourself, in other words, from being in situations that you might not be able to handle, aka going to events or parties or things like that you will feel like might push you backwards. So paying attention to those types of situations is key. And really doing what you say you're going to do. And again, leading by example. And hopefully the spouse will start to see some of those changes and like the changes, and then will want to follow suit. But it's really important that you stay focused on yourself. And the last thing I'll say is, you can go on it on your own. You can try to work on these things by yourself, or you can hire somebody, a coach, me, anybody else, to walk that path with you that will help guide you and keep you upright and supported and in this direction that you want to go, that you can feel secure enough to do that. Because it is really hard when you have a partner that is a polar opposite, that wants to continue drinking. So
Yeah.
it is a real concern.
This person has also brought up a really, really good fear. And that is that I fear we'll grow apart if I quit.
Yeah.
And that's a very real fear.
Yes. And it can happen. It can. And here's the thing. It goes back to when we think, it's a cutesy little term, but there's some seriousness behind it. Liquid glue, right? If we think about, if alcohol is the only thing that's keeping the relationship going, then you're going to have to work on the relationship after you get to a place with your relationship with alcohol. I would recommend that you work on yourself first, because if you're both still in this, habitual process with the alcohol, then it's almost like you can't, it's so hard. You're trying to work on too many things. You got to clear out one thing so you can be focused and be really strong on where you are before you can take on something big like a relationship. So that would be my recommendation for sure.
Because I remember when things started to go wrong with Charles, it pointed out places in our marriage. And, we went through a rough time too. So we've been married 35 years. So, I'm not married 35 years without hitting some rough spots.
Oh yeah. Same here.
But by the time he died, we'd been to so many support groups for his alcohol and substance misuse that we learned that we had already worked through a lot of our personal issues. And it worked. It worked. Like you said, once I got to Families Anonymous, I recognized I need to work on me. And I can control me. I can't control my son. I can't control how my husband is reacting to it. All I can do is control me and model good behavior. And that is when I started to see some changes. And I felt better about myself then.
Yeah.
And I felt like less of a nag. That nagging never works.
No,
When does lecture ever worked?
Yes, it doesn't work, and nobody wants that. And really being authentic to who you are and who you want to be is so important. And when you really are showing up for yourself, there's no greater reward than when you are investing the energy and time into you to grow, to expand your life, to be this best version of yourself. There's so much enjoyment and fulfillment that naturally comes from that you can't put into words. But when we are in a place of, especially if your gray area drinking is getting to a place where it's really becoming very concerning, once we really start to work on that, you can move that out of the way, and just having that little bit of a fog lift out of your life, then you can start to see the bigger picture, and there's hope. There's freedom in that. It's like being a dang slave to it. You know, I remember working during the day thinking, like I'd wake up not feeling great, and I'm like, I can't drink tonight. And then by 1 o'clock, I'm like, yeah, I feel better. Let's see. I think I want chicken tonight or fish. And I would literally go buy a bottle of white wine because I wanted chicken or fish for dinner. And or I think about the opposite. I think like, oh, I really want red wine tonight. I should make some steak or pasta. So, I mean, when you start to get to that place, and then you can remove that heavy feeling of like, do I have wine at home or alcohol at the house, and I need to stop at the store? When you can get rid of all that, and you can focus your energy on like taking a yoga class, or I don't know, playing ball with your dog, or spending time with your kids, or, you know, there's so meaningful things that you could be doing, taking an online course, getting a degree, starting a business. I mean, there's a multitude of things that you can do when you start to channel your energy into something that is so wonderful that it's going to expand you in your life. Wow. No better reward than that. For sure. And this isn't about quitting drinking en masse. I want to make sure that I'm really clear on that. With my program, it's not about you have to quit. I'm not a sober coach. I'm not a recovery coach. I really work on discovering what is the stress that's causing people to drink. We find healthier ways to deal with that stress. Alcohol may or may not come back into their life. Yeah. Most of my clients do not go back to drinking. They end up quitting, but there has been one or two that has had an occasional glass of wine or a beer now and then, and it's not a big deal for them. Again, they're not physically dependent, nor were they physically dependent, so they can find a way to moderate. But here's the big takeaway from all of that, is that most people find that their life is so much richer and so much more fulfilled, and they're in a much better place. The question then really becomes the question that I ask myself too: why would I want to go back to drinking? Right? I've been alcohol free for 4 years now, or over 4 years now. And it's like, why would I even want to go back? It serves no purpose in my life. So I could, I think I probably could, but I don't have any desire to. There's no room in it in my life anymore.
How long did it take you? Because I also gave up sugar at the same time, and mine was for health reasons. So I gave up alcohol and sugar at the same time. And it was a while before I could safely say, you know, I didn't have like these giant cravings. I didn't have hangovers. I didn't have, you know, DTs or withdrawal or anything like that. But it would enter my head. And for me, it was about 18 months where it would kind of come in, and now it's just completely out of my life. Now, once I made the choice after Charles died, I just never went back. I mean, because it had been longer, and I just was like, well, it wasn't doing anything for me.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that does vary from person to person, right? For me, it was probably about that long too. It might have been a good amount up to a year before I wasn't triggered, or I wasn't thinking about it, or a situation popped up. And this is very natural for this to happen, where we've created this loop pattern in our brain that this is what we've always done. When we're in this situation, your brain says, hey, remember that? Remember the last time you were feeling this way? You had a glass of wine and you felt better. Hey, you could do that again, right? So when we start to recognize that thinking that I mentioned earlier, we can pay attention to those thought patterns that happen. We can get a better handle on it. Now, being said that, triggers will always come. Triggers will lessen over time, but triggers you cannot control. Thinking past the trigger you can control. And this is where there's this nuanced phase that's really important. And I think one of our guests today was talking about the SABER. And the SABER flow is an acronym, and I'm going to go over that really quickly. It's a tool that I use with my clients that was created after my own experience at the grocery store after being triggered. And I went through the steps, and when I realized that the steps that I was doing was creating new neural pathways in my brain, that I was neural sculpting new neural thoughts, neural patterns in my brain, that this was something really special and it works. So everybody who learns the SABER, and it can be used for multiple facets of life, not just with drinking. It can work when anytime you have two conflicting thoughts or two incongruent thoughts, or you have a power struggle in your mind, or any emotion that's happening where you're just like, it's like you're fighting inside your head, or cognitive dissonance, if you know what that is. Anytime you're in that situation, you want to say the word stop. That's the S in SABER, right? You say stop. When you say stop out loud, what happens? Like immediately you go, what? It's like everything clears the deck. It's almost like your thoughts just go, whoosh, they disappear. Now in that couple seconds where you have this disappearing of thoughts, or like you stop that process from happening and you say stop out loud, then this is the time you want to acknowledge. This is the A in SABER. You want to acknowledge those two thoughts. I kind of refer to this as a power struggle within our brain, or a power struggle because they're incongruent thoughts, and we have to look at them for if they're true or not, right? So we look at that. Thank you. S for stop. A is for acknowledge. You want to acknowledge the thoughts. There's no judgment here. We're just looking at the thoughts. We're asking, is it true? If it's not true, what could be true? 9 out of 10 times, these thoughts that you're having are not true. But again, we're not making any decisions on this right now. We're just acknowledging the thoughts. The B for SABER is breathe. This is an opportunity at this point of this process. And when you're doing this in real time, it's going to take me 3 times as long to explain it than it is to actually do it. When you're going through this process and you get to the B for breathe, you want to really take this seriously. This is some deep controlled breathing that you want to happen here. And the reason why is we need to move from this sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze response that our nervous system is having in the moment. And we want to bring it down and calm into a parasympathetic, calm and rest and relaxation state. So we need to calm our breath and our nervous system. And how we do that is through breath. And we can do this with a couple different breath techniques. Some of them is just deep controlled breathing. You want to do this a couple times. You could do box breathing, a couple of rounds of box breathing, which is a 4-second inhale. You're holding at the top for 4. You're going to exhale for 4. And you're going to hold again for 4, and you repeat that. It's like a box with your breath. And if you do box breathing for 3 rounds, that will help to calm you down. So B, you want to really take the opportunity to breathe. This is probably one of the most important steps. The E for SABER is embrace. We want to embrace where we are in this moment. It sounds like a quick, easy step to like gloss over, but it's important to embrace this moment for where you are. Number 1, give yourself some grace. If you were triggered for something, in my situation in the grocery store I was 2 years alcohol free. I go to the Wegmans. I see the wine display in front of the cabinet to the seafood department. I was going to buy salmon. And I saw my favorite Chardonnay that I used to drink that was on this display. All of a sudden, I must have had a bad day at work. I don't know. Something happened. I had a trigger. See the wine. I stopped. It looked at the display and my mouth started watering for this Chardonnay. I was like, oh my God, I would love to have this wine. And then I'm like, Kari, what? Like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I really want to buy this wine. I shouldn't buy the wine. Oh my God, you haven't drank in 2 years. Why would you even think this thought? And all this rat race is going on in my head. And that's when I said, stop. When I said stop, it was like, oh, I have a second to acknowledge this thinking. And then I naturally took a breath. So see in real time how this works. So you take the breath, then I'm embracing the moment. This is real work. You're literally neurosculpting your thoughts and your thinking and creating neural pathways. This is a time to give yourself some love and grace. You can even say a prayer here if you want to. Sometimes that works really good. Always works good. The R is redirect. You want to redirect your thinking to something new. Now, this is a step that people get tripped up on sometimes. So with redirecting your thought, it's easy to say, well, okay, my situation, well, I don't want that. Well, actually, I really did want it. So I had to make the decision. I had to make an empowering decision. No, Kari, you really don't want that wine. And then I had to build evidence around that decision. So my decision was, I don't really want the wine. Why? Because I haven't drank in 2 years. Why would I even ruin this opportunity just because I'm salivating over something temporary that I know is just a trigger? I've acknowledged it for what it is. I love my life as being a non-drinker. I don't want to get drunk. I don't want to feel the effects of this wine. I'm making the decision that I'm going to go with my plan tonight of having club soda and cranberry with a twist of lime and go get my salmon. And that's what I did. So that's a real life example of how to use the SABER, but you can use the SABER in any situation that you feel overly stressed, anxious, or if you're having a conflicting thought or these incongruent thoughts, you walk through the process of the SABER, which, by the way, the book that's coming out that I was a co-author on, The Successful Mind, my chapter that I wrote is all about the SABER. So if you want more information, the book will be out hopefully in a month. We just got word today. It's in the last final editing stages. You know this, Ann Moss. It's so much fun.
Yeah, that is the fun part. I'm still in the middle of writing a book that is really intense, and it's the hard part. So I wanted to ask one last question, and
yes.
That is, other than the breathing, what are some of the coping strategies that you now use instead of, because before it was easy just to do this. What are your coping strategies other than the one you just explained?
Yep. So SABER for sure. I use that all the time and I still use it. I use it all the time. And everyone in my family.
For anything.
I use the SABER for everything. It's not just for drinking. It is for every situation when I'm angry or upset or like, or you're telling a story about something like this. This is what gets us tripped up with stress, right? And this is important to talk about this just for a brief second. You create stories. We don't like open loops. We don't like unanswered questions in our mind. We want to close the loop. So how do we do this? We make up some stupid story in our head, convoluted, untrue story about why the neighbor didn't text you back after you texted them. Are they mad at you? What did you do? Oh my God, they're mad at me because I did this and I did that. Oh my God, maybe they found out that I said something to Aunt Julie and she told them. And then we create this crazy story in our brain that is not true. So you can use the SABER in any of those methods, but to go back to some practical tips besides breathing, journaling is absolutely one of my number one tools. I think it's important. And some people don't like to actual write things out. So what you can do is you can use your phone and voice text it. You can doodle. You just want to brain dump all this stuff out, how you're feeling, to start looking for patterns. Exercise, cannot underscore circle exercise. It produces endorphins, right? Which are what? They are feel good neurotransmitters, or feel good emotions rather. And that creates this good feeling for us, right? So instead of using dopamine and alcohol and drugs and pills and all these other things, we can get some really good feel good emotions and feelings naturally with exercise. So moving your body. And when you start to feel good, healthy wise, it's going to encourage you to continue to do that. So absolutely exercise, journaling, breathing. Educate yourself. Get some sort of like podcast that you love to listen to. Go for a walk. You're knocking out two things. You can actually listen to your favorite book or a podcast while you're exercising. That's one of the favorite things. Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, the SABER is great in all kinds of situations. Doing some of these daily habits, reading, prayer time, meditation is another really big one. People that practice meditation on a regular basis tend to be happier, more productive, and calmer. So by adding in meditation, and the last one that I'll say because of time, I'll say cold showers. Yes, cold showers. So why does cold showers work? Well, cold therapy in itself works wonders. And Tony Robbins is probably the best example I can give you right now off the top of my head. Every morning that man walks up, the first thing he does, he has he's lucky he can afford it, but he has a submerged pool that he puts himself in, which is ice cold, ice cold. And he submerges himself in this ice cold bath for, I want to say it's 30 to 45 seconds or even a minute. It's not that long, but what it does is
lucky him.
But there's a reason why cold water anytime. So if you drink a cold glass of water when you wake up, and if you don't want to take a cold shower the moment you get in the shower, I'm one of those people. I can't do that. I start off with like warm, on the heavier warm side. And then as I'm going through the shower, I turn it colder and colder. And the last 2 to 5 minutes of my shower, I try to put on, I go from chilly to ice cold. And let's be real. I've been doing this now for a couple of years. I can manage ice cold for about 2 minutes, not much more than that. But I can do it. So if you can start ending your showers with cold water, you can start off with chili if you want to
do that.
It's really good for you. It helps with your mood, with weight loss, your skin. It is very helpful for addictions. It's helpful for your sleep. I said hormones, right? Yeah. For men and women, your skin, your hair, your nails, your mood, your clarity. There's so many benefits to cold showers that we just sort of overlook it. And so adding in cold therapy is probably one of the best things that you can add in. And it's so easy to do.
It's a vagal nerve stimulant. So
yes.
We are 1 minute before the top of the hour.
Yes.
In the interest of everybody's time here, tell us where we can find out more about you and a little bit about your consulting business.
Okay, great. Well, the website is in the chat. It's graytonic.com. That's the easiest, best way to find me because every other outlet's on there. I have a 7-day email video series called the Decide series. And the Decide series is this 7-day email and video series that will walk you through some questions for you to ask to see if now is the time for you to make a shift out of the gray area. And at the end of that 7 days, you can take what you've learned and go on your own, or you can elect to have a conversation with me. I'll either set you up with a do-it-yourself plan, or we can work together and I'll come side by side with you for a 3-month season. And we do that with weekly calls, and I will be there to support you and walk you through that time together. So that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much. This has been very enlightening. I mean, you even said things that I wasn't aware of. And I love the SABER. I wrote that down because I actually use that when I see sweets.
Yes.
And I don't have to anymore because it's just natural. But it was a lot harder for me to give up chocolate and all that. Well, I didn't give up chocolate. I didn't do sugar-free chocolate, but I gave up everything else. Ice cream. I had to give up ice cream. So that was tough for me. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate Kari joining us tonight, and all of you too. There'll be a recording. I remembered to record it. Yay. And I hope everybody has a good evening. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.